I never panicked when I was being held at gunpoint. But when I'd regressed back to that scene, it's like the panic attack came 30 years later, and I felt really sorry for the therapist at the time. But the girl that I'd locked away for so long, I went back into that room, I took her hand, and I embedded her into my life.
Hi, and welcome to A Class of Their Own podcast, revealing the human stories behind their name. We will hear honest and intimate reflections from our guests who, despite their circumstances, shape a world that reflects their unique visions of success. Join me, Mira Magecha, to learn from these inspirational people and take the first step to make your own change. On today's episode, we're joined by Tracey Hill. Hi, Tracey.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm good.
So we were talking just before we came on about how we were introduced.
Yeah.
And in all honesty, neither one of us can remember.
No, but it's obviously meant to be.
But it is meant to be. And we've had a short conversation before you coming on here today. I remember starting that conversation saying, okay, this is Tracey. I'm going to have a conversation. And then I got on the call with you. You started speaking and I was just blown away. I was blown away by some of what you shared, but I was also blown away by how someone can go through some of the stories and journey that you've shared with me. So I know today may be a tough conversation, so I'm going to thank you in advance. I know you haven't shared it before, so thank you.
No, thank you for giving me the opportunity. It's going to be an interesting one. So if I start bawling, then
we're all good.
I've got tissue.
We've got time. We've got we can take moments.
Brilliant.
We can do that.
Take a pause.
Exactly. Take a pause. I'm going to start with tell our listeners who Tracey is.
Oh, who is Tracey? I suppose Tracey in this chapter, because there's been many, is a mother now. I never thought I would be. So I'm a mother to a beautiful princess warrior, 5-year-old. She looks like the white-haired actress out of Game of Thrones. It's like completely opposite to me. I'm like, how has she got the whitest hair? Super long.
Wow.
Yeah. And I'm just a whole bundle of empathy, love, courageous. I think I'm very courageous in terms of me as a woman, and I'm strong, but I have a lot of love to give everybody. But my day-to-day, I'm a performance therapist and coach.
Amazing. How does Tracey get to where she is today? What's the journey you've been on? From you get to choose when you start. This conversation.
I think we probably start at where I probably found myself 6 years ago. It's around 6 years ago. It's lockdown had just started. Maybe it's 5 years ago.
2000, so about 5 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago.
And I was working in corporate, had done for 20 years. High-performing teams. It was, how can I put it, highly competitive. And I found myself sat in my office. And I don't know why. I think it was like 9:30 at night. And my daughter, she was about 1 at the time. Well, not even 1, I don't think. I thought, I've not seen her for ages. And she's in the house. So I was like confined in my office. And I felt like I had done 30 years prior to that. I felt like I was being held hostage, I suppose. And I just completely broke down in my office and thought, who am I? Like, who is this person? Who have I turned into? And it was all I can say. It was like this nudge here going, wake the fuck up. Like, look at your life now. This chapter isn't for you anymore. And you need to go and do something else. So I did.
So we're in the middle of lockdown. Your daughter's in the house. You're working from home. And you've got this moment.
Yeah.
And you're just in tears.
I'm completely in tears on the floor. And I looked in the mirror because I thought, I can't come out of this office. One, see my partner while I look like a panda bear. Literally just had mascara around my face, because I was a person that absolutely held it all together. Some people would think that I was stone, but I was completely the opposite.
Yeah.
I just locked that part of Tracey in Pandora's box, never to be opened. And I think in that moment, I felt like actually, instead of someone else holding me hostage, I was holding myself hostage to this life. And there had to be more. And honestly, I didn't really know what it was telling me, but I knew change had to happen. And from that moment, I completely changed everything in my life.
When you first started speaking, you talked about being held hostage and it being similar to something that happened 30 years prior. What happened then?
So if we go back to probably before that happened, when I was 13, that was the first time I was ever sexually and physically assaulted. And my childhood was an interesting one. My mum and dad had separated and we moved away from him. And we never really saw my mum because she worked like 6 jobs. And my brother, so I was like 8, my brother was 6. Yeah, it was tough. Which meant, I suppose, I had the freedom to do pretty much anything, even though she was a strict mother, wouldn't really see her.
Yeah.
And I found myself just jumping from one scenario to another, which was that I'd been surrounded as a child by abuse. And somehow I was reinventing that wheel in my life. I didn't know that really at the time. I just thought these things were happening to me. And they were. But the time where I really felt that I was, I suppose, held hostage was when I was 17, just turned 18, actually. Before that, I was in a very abusive relationship as well. I'd been groomed for quite a while, older man.
So let's start maybe towards the beginning of you're 13, your parents are split up, you're living with your mum, but actually she's not around very much.
Yeah.
What's happening? Where's your brother? What's going on?
We are in playing sport, both big in sport. After school clubs, we'd be collected by a lady that would take us home. And then we have a babysitter. And then mum comes home at midnight. She's gone by 6.
Right.
So it's just the same thing again.
And do you spend time at weekends with her? Do you see her very much at all?
Sundays, we used to see her, like, properly. But I completely understood why she had to do that. It was different back then. She wanted us to live in a certain place that could give us good schooling. And she wanted us to be in a good area. But that came at the sacrifice of never seeing her.
Yeah.
And I suppose that turned into my life in a way, that I was filling my time myself with work and never seeing anyone.
Yep.
And then when I had a daughter, the realisation was, wow.
This is what I've just done.
This is what I've just done again.
Yeah.
I've turned into my mother. But
we all do to some extent, I'm sure. Turn into our mums and go, oh my God, when did that happen?
Yeah, absolutely.
What happened at the age of 13?
So 13 was when my first sexual and physical assault happened at school. It's such an old school, but there was this little alleyway and no one could really see you going down it, but there was two boys. They grabbed me and my friend. She managed to run off. Two of them got me, ripped my shirt open. My skin, I'm not,
Yeah.
Luckily, she'd gone to get someone. And my mum was very well aware of what happened because I spoke up. The boys didn't get punished. Actually, the son was the principal's son of that school. And it was pretty much dismissed as kids, which my mum was furious about. I didn't realise how much that had affected me at the time, but I thought, well, maybe that's just normal.
Yeah.
Maybe these things can happen to us and you just have to let it go.
And you're 13 at this stage?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
What happens over the next 3 years while you're in secondary school?
So the next 3 years from there, I was then, as a kid, like I loved sport, I loved dancing. I was a cheeky kid. I always pushed boundaries, still do.
Yeah.
And I had an amazing imagination. And I think sometimes actually that's what saved my life. But over those years, I did feel lonely, I think. I didn't really see my dad. I hung out with guys a lot more than women. And I then fell into a relationship that now I know I was groomed for a while before that happened.
What was the age difference?
The age difference was 11 years.
Okay.
And yeah, I fell into this trap of he's paying me attention, he thinks I'm pretty. I used to have a massive gap in between my teeth that I used to get bullied for an awful lot. And I think someone found me attractive.
Yeah.
And I obviously felt that was quite endearing. And at that point, I didn't know what grooming really was.
Yeah.
So, that ended up being a very violent relationship from very early on.
And you were really young.
Yeah. I think I was about 15 and I was being hung out of a car going like 40 miles an hour, threatening to let me go. Yeah.
Hung out of a car.
Threatening to let me go. Yeah. I'd be beaten quite severely. Yeah.
Who was around you at this time that you could have gone and spoken to ask for help?
The mad thing is, there are people around. Some of my friends saw what was happening, but they didn't say anything to anyone because they didn't want to get into trouble. I didn't tell my mum for a long time that I was in a relationship with this guy. We just hang out with some of their friends because actually he looked younger than what he was. But the first time my mum realised something was quite bad was when I'd come home and I did have a mark on my face. Normally, he was very good at everything was from here down.
Yeah.
But this particular evening, I stayed there. I said I'd stayed at my friend's house. Of course, I was a kid.
Yeah.
And he made me sit in the corner completely naked all night. And if I moved, he'd headbutt me or kick me. And I tried to get up and he headbutted me but caught my face at the same time. And the first excuse I gave my mum was that I think it was like I'd hit it on a corner cabinet or something. And she just looked at me and she said, "Are you fucking crazy? Do you actually think that I believe that?" And I was like, "No, Mum, like, I promise, that's what happened."
What happened next?
Well, I tried then to leave and get away, but I was constantly barraged with "I'm sorry's" and this, that and the other. And I think really what happened from that was that's when I fell into the next bad chapter. That
It gets worse.
oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I had I grew up with a friend, and she introduced me to her brother through just through hanging out, really. Didn't really know much about him at the time. I knew enough, but I knew he was trouble. And I thought that if he knows that I'm hanging around with these people, maybe then he will leave me alone. And I suppose that was sort of my get out in a way, because the last thing that happened was my next door neighbour had come rushing in. He was trying to drown me in the bath. And luckily my brother had seen what had happened, and because my mum wasn't there at the time. And I thought, right, I have to get out now. Like, this is not good. So he sort of knew that I was hanging around with this new person, and everything quietened down on that side because he was bigger, more dangerous, better. I don't know. But at that point, I didn't really realise the extent of what I was getting myself into.
Right. And what were you getting yourself into?
Well, what I didn't know at the time was he'd actually been in prison for murder.
Okay.
And other offences.
And this was a friend of yours brother? Okay.
Yeah.
Was your friend aware of...
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. But I don't even know how to describe it. It wasn't like there was no threatening behaviour there or anything like that. It was just having fun and, nothing in it. There was nothing there.
How old were you at this point?
I was 17 then. I think 17. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, 17.
Okay. So you're hanging out with...
Yeah, hanging out with them, and we became closer. And I think, again, I don't know why, I thought maybe I can change this person. Maybe I can help. And that's that empath side to me, right? And after probably around sort of 2 months of getting to know them, I just said, I'm not sort of interested in that way. I liked him, and, but I just knew. I remember sitting in the car park, just saying, I just want to let you know that, I know certain things have happened, but I don't want to be with anyone. I just need time and space.
Yeah.
And he just laughed. And he said, "Okay, all right." Well, I never got out for 4 years.
What do you mean you never got out?
I never got out of that relationship for 4 years.
What happened?
Oh, I mean, this needs to be a 2-part episode.
Maybe it does.
Lots happened. Let's just say I fell into a criminal world that you only experience or view in a crime documentary or something like that. And I mean, I saw the horrible side of what goes on in this country, in our world, to young people like me. I didn't realise at the time that he had control over so many things. So, for example, to hurt me, or if I wanted to get away to hurt me, he would throw bricks through windows, my family, cars, have people attacked. I would be followed consistently, not by him, but by the people that worked for him. My friends had to move out of the country. I couldn't have friends. I couldn't have family. I couldn't have anything. Yeah, I mean, I've been held at gunpoint like 5 times.
All because you had met this guy.
All because I met this guy.
And you said to him 2 months in, you're not looking for a relationship.
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden, he won't let you go?
No, because I'm his. That's how he sees me.
You're a commodity.
Absolutely. And everyone around him was. And this went deeper than, just thugs. Our authorities worked for him. Our police force worked for him. And they would follow me. It wasn't his people following me. Well, it was. But it was our own authorities, the people that are meant to protect you.
Yeah, so you had nowhere to go.
I had nowhere to go. Absolutely nowhere. My family, my mum and my stepdad, I mean, I think now, and I had so much regret thinking, how could I have put my family through this? Like, it was easier just to end it. Thank God, I'm so glad that I didn't. But they would go into the station to speak with authorities. And my mum said, as she was walking out one day, her phone rang and it was him laughing down the phone, going, you can't do anything. So stop trying because they were working for him. So the minute she walked in, they phoned him.
And again, I don't know if you can answer this question, but what gave him the power and authority to be able to do that?
Narcotics. Everyone's making something. And to also, I didn't really realise this at the time, but some of the police that were involved in this were also under threat.
Yeah.
So their children were also being followed to school. Yeah.
Because it's a vicious circle.
Absolutely.
Because once you're in that, how do you get out? Because otherwise they're being threatened, their family's being threatened, and therefore it's that vicious cycle continues.
Yeah. And, I remember walking down the hallway one evening because I heard lots of voices, and I remember opening the door and they're all sitting there like having this conversation about a particular event that was going to happen. And it wasn't just police force, like there's solicitors there. It was, yeah.
The whole protection.
The whole thing, you know it. You've got criminals, police and lawyers all in the same room, all on the take.
What happens through these 4 years?
So many things happen. So I obviously worked, like I did. I had a job. And I also got my own flat as well. Like that was the first thing I thought, okay, I've managed to now at least secure my own place. Like surely I'll be okay.
That gives you some freedom, some independence.
But actually I could never leave or come back, or if it was 2 a.m. and he wanted to come in.
He did.
I just felt like, I wasn't living. That's not what life was.
What were you doing at this time in terms of work?
I was working in a travel agent and I was working in a pub. Both were raided multiple times. Both were threatened multiple times. Yeah.
Just to know that there was no way that you
Yeah,
wouldn't...
like if I was working in the pub, for example, if he couldn't get hold of me, he would be coming in and everyone would know about it.
Yeah.
And he'd grab me from behind the bar. And if then the landlord would come out, he'd threaten to kill him. He'd have the place smashed up. Yeah, it's insane, to be honest. It was an insane world.
So you do this for 4 years because there's no escape. How did you escape it?
So my family moved away. Well, they basically sold the house, moved out of the village that they were living in. They asked me to go with them because 2 weeks before that, I'd actually tried to take my life. And I just thought, this has to, like, I don't want this to be my life. Like, at this point, I'd never experienced love, like what it was like to be actually loved by someone.
Yeah.
What it was like to have sex with someone that you felt intimate with and loved. Like, I'd never experienced any of that. And I just thought, like, I have to do something. So my mum, when they were moving out of the village, my car was there and it had been smashed up completely. When I come outside, it was just done. It was a write-off. And she said, look, just like move with us, come with us. I had a call that day from a police officer quite high up in the police force.
Take your time. We also can just pause and we can stop at any point.
He said to me, hi, Tracey. I need you to know that there is nothing we can do for you at this stage. You won't understand this, but there's something bigger going on. And I suggest you run, basically.
Wow.
So they were willing to sacrifice my life, my family's life, for something bigger. And obviously I didn't know what that was at the time. But that bigger thing was that our, I suppose, higher police force, Scotland Yard, they were working for him under surveillance.
Right.
And
you're 21 at this point, roughly.
Yeah.
This is a lot to bear as a 21-year-old, given that you've been doing this since you were 17.
Yeah. Yeah. But, you know, I just felt riddled with guilt for everyone else and everyone else's life that I'd affected by. It was just mad. Like, I don't know. I don't know how I got through it. I think I dealt with, I'd become quite fearless in a way. It was like, there's nothing anyone else can physically, mentally do to me. Like, actually, I remember saying, like, when I didn't take my life, I just thought, no, fuck you. You know what? I just want to live another day. If I get to live another day and you take my life, so be it. But I didn't want to take my own life thinking, oh, you know, that poor girl, you know, the one that was, I didn't want to be that person. I thought, no, I'm going out fighting.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that's what he did pretty much. he found out where I was. I was just literally moving from suitcase to place to different.
You ran?
Yeah. So I'd spend some time at my mum's. I'd then borrow like a friend's car that he didn't know. So like a new friendship group. I had to stay there. And when I would hear that they were close, I'd then move. But you know,
you never left the country.
I didn't leave the country, no. And then sometimes I thought, I mean, I wanted to, but yeah, there was something that I think kept me here. And then I was 22, and I met then who was to be my husband. And I don't know how, in a million years, he took on that burden in a way to just, no one would, like all of my brother's friends, everyone was saying, like, do not go near her with a barge pole, you're dead.
Yeah. and to be fair,
oh yeah, absolutely,
that was a real risk, I'm assuming, at this point.
And I mean, his family's house got so things had happened that even though it was never him, there was always people were always being paid to do certain things.
Yeah.
You know, but I think I must have been 22 or 23. But then he was arrested.
This episode is brought to you by Play for Change. Play for Change brings together leadership coaching, expert facilitation, and builds communities. They help craft real connections, spark learning, and turn play into powerful experiments to enable better relationships with yourself and others around you. To find out more, go to playforchange.co.uk. Links are in the show notes below. Have you started a relationship with your to-be husband at this point, or?
Sort of. It was very much a friendship. But he'd even I remember when I was in my bedroom and I don't know what, I think my brother must have said, look, because I knew him from school, do me a favour, phone her up and just ask her out for a drink. And I remember picking up the phone downstairs going, hello? I was like, oh, what do I owe this pleasure? And then it was just silence. He was like, do you fancy going for a drink sometime? And I was like, is he batshit crazy? And then I thought, I physically can't walk to that pub to meet him for a drink. Coming out of this front door is a risk. And I had friends walk with me, and I mean 250 metres up the road.
Yeah. So did you never leave the house at this point, really?
Not really. No, not really. I left to go to work and things, but I was okay with that. But if it was the weekend, because he knew where I was when I was then, but it would quieten down at the weekend. He had other things on.
Right.
But I still just had this thing in the back of my head because that's had been programmed, Tracey, just be wary, literally 100 eyes everywhere.
Yeah.
It's always on the lookout for danger. Even if it wasn't for me.
For somebody else.
You know. So, yeah, I met him, had a drink, and even just that, someone asking me out for a drink, buying me a drink in a way that it was just nice, polite, loving.
Yeah.
I mean, my best friend wanted to marry him, so I never thought in a million years that I would end up with him then.
And then you say he was arrested.
Yeah.
What happened?
Well, I found out.
Was that the end of your saga?
That was pretty much the end of it. Yes, that was the end of that saga. He was sentenced to many, many years. Yeah. And then resentenced. But he navigated the outside world whilst inside. Still does recently. Yeah.
What impact has that had on your life today?
So 5 years ago, up to that point, I didn't realise the impact it had had. But like I said before, my imagination was amazing. And I think I always, when things were so bad, I would just keep myself in this dream state of like, my life's not going to be like this. I'm going to work for the biggest corporates. I'm going to do X, Y, Z. And I did go on to do that. But I kept myself so busy, always achieving, always striving, always performing, that was a form of self-sabotage. That with alcohol and everything else that came into it. And I wanted to look after everyone, so I needed to earn more and more and more money and just look after the people around me because I consistently felt guilty.
Yeah, for everything that happened and what you put them through.
Yeah.
Or what you believed you had put them through, sorry.
Exactly. And then I think, I just spent years doing that, literally working my butt off, striving for the next big thing. I was really successful at what I did, but I didn't realise at that point that it was just a form of me keeping myself busy so I didn't have to deal with the past trauma.
When you think back to that time, what do you think kept you safe?
I never expected tomorrow. I literally lived 1 hour at a time. And I think that's what kept me safe to a certain extent. I could not allow them to get into my head too much. Because if I did, I'd have taken my life so many times.
How did you stop yourself from them getting into your head?
My imagination.
And what was it that you were imagining?
A life that didn't look like this. I imagined love, a partner. I imagined myself having a nice house, nice car, being self-sufficient, independent. I imagined people seeing me for me, not what was done to me, or as a victim.
Were you a victim?
What happened to me wasn't my fault. So I suppose I was a victim to a certain extent, but I didn't have a victim mentality. I didn't want anyone to feel sorry for me because, this was where I was, this is it. And even though I didn't really believe that I'd put myself in that position, I'd got myself in that position.
Do you think about or wonder why he chose you versus you chose him? Because he had the power for, I'm assuming, again, I'm making some assumptions, but I'm assuming he had the power to do this to anyone.
I'm not saying that I attracted this in a way, but I think there was obviously vulnerability in me.
Yeah.
And him and the person before that could absolutely see it. That I was, arms wide open to being, saved, controlled. That I was protective as well. And protective of those around me, that he would never really come for me as such. It would be like, well, if that's what you want to do, then this will happen. And it will be your mum, your brother, your friends. I remember my friend's dad. I mean, he'd got guns, it was insane.
Your friend's dad
got guns to protect his family, his daughter. Yeah. And she did move away in the end. She moved across the world. She's back now, though.
What were your friendships like at this point? Because
non-existent. Now now they're not, but back then, it was difficult for me to have friendships. Yeah, he didn't like that at all.
But you were still working.
Yeah,
you were allowed. I'm going to use that word specifically.
Yeah, allowed, unless so just to give an example of when, like, I was at work. I was working in an accounts department at the time, and he couldn't get hold of me. And this was quite a big company. If he wanted me, he would get access to me. So a white van pulled up, balaclavas went on, they came, got me, threw me in the back of a van, and left with me. And people, like some of the managers, got in their cars and followed and called the police. But again, yeah,
it was futile. Did you hold down jobs at this point?
This particular one, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, actually, the director or the owner is no longer here anymore. But yeah, he was a beautiful part, I think, of my story, because he showed me what I was capable of, and he wasn't going to give up on me. Yeah. He sort of became like the father figure in a way that I didn't really have, but in a business sense.
Yeah. What, and again, I don't know if you can answer this question, but what allowed you to get away? Yes, he got put into prison.
Yeah. But there were other things by that time, other women and relationships that I had moved down. And yeah.
You were no longer a priority.
Absolutely.
And that was his choice, basically.
Of course.
He let you go.
Absolutely.
So what happens after this? You meet your husband.
I meet my then husband.
Yeah.
We're since divorced, but I met my husband, and life was great. You know.
How do you get through what's happened in the last 21 years of your life at this point?
I had a brilliant way of locking that part of my life away.
Yeah.
And when I mean I locked it in Pandora's box, I'd locked it in Pandora's box.
Never to be seen
never.
Again.
And only very few that know me or had experienced these things with me knew. Other people didn't have a clue. Yeah.
Your husband-to-be at the time?
He obviously knew. Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, he knew. And I think that's why it just made our relationship really special, because I didn't ever have to hide these things from him.
Yeah.
And he still saw me for me. Yeah. And I, honestly, even his friends said, "What are you doing?" Even his family said the same, but he stuck by me no matter what. So, yeah.
And what happened in terms of life?
In terms of life, we both worked our socks off. And we just got into this cycle of work hard, play hard. We didn't have children. We were together 14 years, didn't have children. I was told I couldn't have children. But we didn't know why I couldn't have children.
As in the medical profession couldn't tell you why?
Couldn't tell me why. But now I know why I couldn't, or why it didn't happen.
Yeah. Let's get to that in a minute.
Yeah. But look, let's just say we sort of ended up having like a brother-sister relationship. We passed in the night. We both drank a lot. We worked a lot. And I think we just realised that we needed something else. And there were so many times that, you know, we'd separated or got back together and we're like, no, this is, you know, we're going to really try. But then I think you just know that no, it's time for this chapter to end now.
Yeah.
And it did. It ended. And I was really, really like upset, of course. But now I look at both of us and think, oh, you know, it had to happen. We had to both move on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And are you both still in contact?
No. So we both probably know what's going on in each other's lives because we have mutual friends and things like that. But no, we're not in contact. He's very much happy and married, and as much as I'd love to be friends with him, you know, you just can't sometimes. I think people move on, and that's okay.
And what happens in professional life outside of marriage, etc.? What's happening in your
I'm working in the city, contracting for different firms, and loving life. But I'm working extremely hard.
Yeah. Work is life. Life is work.
That's it. There was nothing else because I didn't allow there to be anything else.
And did you know that that's what you were doing at the time?
No.
Okay.
Not until that day in the office where I looked at my reflection and thought, oh, yeah, this isn't good.
So you couldn't have children, but you have a daughter.
Correct.
So clearly you could have children at some point.
So what happened there was I had been separated for, I think, about a year. And my PA at the time said, it's 10 o'clock at night and you're sitting in Tower 42, go home or get on a date.
I love it. Go home or go on a date. There were your two options.
Yeah, I was like, no, I'm not going to meet anyone. And she was like, just go on a date. So I think she set up my profile as well. And it was funny because actually I designed a dating website like 7 years prior to that. Another story, another time. But I thought, fine, okay. So, you know, I dated a couple of people. It was really good fun. And again, though, there was still this thing of, I'm an independent woman. I don't need anyone to look after me. I'm good, you know. So, and that worked for us until it didn't anymore. And I thought, no, actually, I'm ready to settle down now. So I met my now partner and told him when we first met, look, I don't want to mess us around. I can't have children, and I'm 38. He was 4 years younger than me. He's 4 years younger than me. And he said, that's fine, because I'm actually not looking to have children. So I said, okay, cool. This is really good. So we had sort of planned our life, or we were planning our life, you know, without kids.
Yeah.
And 5 months later, I found out I was pregnant.
Wow.
So it was like, yeah, that was an awkward conversation.
So you couldn't have children. And so you said earlier you didn't know why you couldn't have children because the medical profession couldn't answer that question.
Yes.
What's your theory?
My theory is that subconsciously I told my body not to have children because me having a daughter put the fear of God into me. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'd asked for that. I'd asked never to be put in that situation. You know, I had like, I think 12 godchildren at that time. And everyone just thought, Tracey's never going to have kids. She's just so career driven. I never, you know, but I did, of course. But subconsciously, I'm like, no, I couldn't deal with that. And then I found out I was having a girl and I was just like that, oh.
What did that do?
Well, in a way, it made me realise that I wanted her to know my story. And that when she was old enough, I would tell her about my life and the things that had happened. Because I want to be open and honest with her. And I hope that she will learn But at the same time, she's on her own journey. I just hope that she knows that I'm very much there to talk to. And God forbid that ever happens, but that I'm always there. And that I see her.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's an awkward conversation with 5 months in going, oops, I'm pregnant when I didn't think I could be.
Yeah.
What's happening to your body? And I don't mean physically happening to your body while you're having a baby, but what's happening to everything else, your emotions, your feelings?
Yeah. So immediately I thought, I need to tell the board because they're all men and they also didn't expect me to have children.
Right.
So my immediate thing was, oh, I'm going to lose my job. I'm going to lose. Like, literally, what? Who cares? But for me, work was my life.
Yeah.
And work, in a weird way, they were my family as well. But now I've realised, well, they weren't, but...
they were your support network in your own,
in my own way. Yeah. So, I told them, and actually it was all really good. I didn't want to be back to work after like 5 months. So, yeah. But emotionally, I was sort of, I don't know, I felt so connected to her that she just gave me a new lease of life before she was even born. And to this day, I say it, like, I truly believe she actually saved my life.
Was your life not already saved by this point?
No, I mean, I had sleep disorders, autoimmune, like I was just, a bit of a mess, to be honest. On the outside, you wouldn't see it as much. But yeah, I remember coming back from St Pancras on a train and it got stopped. And little did I know the person I was actually sat next to in first class was a doctor. And apparently mid-conversation, I was completely blacked out and he couldn't feel a pulse. And there were other occasions where I would just black out. Like, I wasn't okay. So she gave me something to truly live for. Yeah. And of course, I felt healthier than I ever had. But in the same time, in the back of my head, I'm always thinking, oh God, what if this happens when she gets to this age? What if this happens? How am I going to protect her? And I suppose that hasn't really stopped, you know. And days and weeks and months and years have gone so quickly since I've had her. And she's 5 now, she's 6 soon. And I'm like, wow, some great things can happen. But it's like life pushes us to our limits. And that's what happened.
And why do you think life was pushing you to your limits?
Well, I just thought, I always thought, how can this be happening to me? Like, I must have to play a role somewhere further down the line where I had to experience all this.
Really?
Yeah.
Is that what you were thinking?
Yeah. And I still think sometimes to this day that I had to go through everything I did to do the job I do today.
And what is the job that you do today?
So I'm a therapist and coach, performance therapist, but my therapy of choice is regressive hypnotherapy.
So explain what that is.
So it's where I get to the root cause of a problem subconsciously very quickly. I understand the scenes that happened in your life. I connect the dots and then we install a new program like you would on your phone, I suppose. When you're doing a software update, I just do it in human form.
Right.
And I believe that because I have lived through so much trauma, I'm able to understand and connect with the people that I work with on a completely different level.
And who are typically the people you work with?
So it's funny you should ask this because I was asked the other day and we really niched down, but High performers, so execs, founders, entrepreneurs, a couple of rugby players I've worked with.
Right.
Yeah, high performers.
And why do they need this? Because why would I come to you in terms of doing this? Is it because I recognise there's a trauma?
No, you don't recognise any trauma.
No.
And this is, I suppose, the point. If I had £1 for everyone that said to me, Tracey, I've got this, I don't know, like I'm doubting myself at the minute, or there's whatever that presenting problem is. It could be IBS. It could be that, you lack confidence or you're highly anxious and stressed. It could be some other illness, addiction, whatever it is. But I know why. I know why, because this event at this time and this happened. I'm like, okay. I know that's not why. Now, it might be one of the connecting dots, but it's not the main one. Because subconsciously, the majority of us do lock it away in Pandora's box. And we hide it and suppress emotion and everything for as long as we can. But like when that nudge was happening to me in that office that day, this is also happening to them. And it's like I'm the last resort. So they'll go to the doctors, be put on meds, or, I've got this, I've got that. And really, they haven't got anything. I just need an understanding of where this presenting problem actually came from and what was the root cause of it. So yeah, they come to me for lots of different reasons. Could be anger issues. Could be lots of different things.
How, after that moment in your office, did you get to where you are today? Because that's not what you were doing previously.
No, I was, I suppose, like sort of sales and advisory. So a bit of both.
Yeah.
I was always a go-to in some of the companies that I worked for, but the last one in particular. And I would see things in people that others wouldn't. They dismiss it. So I sort of, if execs weren't communicating in the right way, somehow I was able to bring them together.
Yeah.
And I think I just tapped into that more, thinking, how can we not lock our past in the past? Actually, let's embrace that. Let's understand how our mind works, but more importantly, how our emotions work to live a better life, healthier, but to be super self-aware of our actions, because 90% of people are not.
Yeah.
And regressive hypnotherapy was a tool that I found worked so rapidly that we just can't deny the results. And I think in a way I then attracted these people that I sort of used to work with in that tech space. And from word of mouth, that just, grew and grew.
And your business is called The Pause Effect.
The pause effect, yes.
Where does that come from? Why?
Well, because in my moment of pause, I was shown lots of the answers. And one thing that I understand from the psychology of a murderer and an exec, we never ever stop. We never stop going after that thing. And actually, a lot of executives are also psychopaths.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of common traits there. But we get into this vicious cycle of never stopping, because when we do, we're actually afraid of it. But the answers are there.
Yeah.
Which is why I called the company The Pause Effect. Because with intentionally pausing, you have power. You can tap into that. By covering it up, deflecting, self-sabotaging, you're going to live quite a miserable life, really.
Yeah.
That holds you hostage.
When you paused and realised the trauma that you've been holding in Pandora's box, how did you release that?
Great question. There's a technique that we use, or I use, there's lots of different techniques, called inner child. Lots of people call it different things, but when I regressed back to one of my scenes, and I also do my self-hypnosis as well, by the way, but when I regressed back to the scene where I was being held at gunpoint, it's mad because I never panicked when I was being held at gunpoint. But when I'd regressed back to that scene, it's like the panic attack came 30 years later, and I felt really sorry for the therapist at the time. But she did something with me called inner child, and the girl that I'd locked away for so long, I went back into that room, I took her hand, and I embedded her into my life, into my heart. And she comes everywhere with me because we can do anything. When I go on stage to talk, I always put my hand down. And a friend said to me before, "What are you doing?" I went,
I'm holding her hand.
Holding me. Because I want to show her that we can do anything. We're not restricted. We're powerful. So that's how I released it.
Were there any other techniques you used?
Or there's many I use.
You use plenty.
I use lots and lots of different tools, but mainly for me,
as in
for
not,
myself, not for others. Yeah. No, for me, that hypnotherapy pretty much released it all. Yeah. I understood my behaviours, my emotions, and because I understood and connected the dots, it allowed me to change my life completely, to be honest, change my entire identity, because, I can reframe like a ninja. Like, someone said to me the other day, she said, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm okay." She went, "You said okay." She went, "But you'd be happy in hell." I was like, "Oh, yeah," but because I'm just, emotionally, I'm so in tune. But I'm only there because of dedication, practice, and understanding myself, my past, and connecting the dots.
What's your advice to anybody else who's going through something, anything like what you've just described, or not described, but something that is traumatic to them?
Yeah, and I think that's it's a good question, because the people that I work with, trauma is different for everyone, and my trauma is trauma, but also a scene potentially, like I was working with a dentist, and they were 7 years old, they'd failed a spelling test in school, gone home, their dad had called them stupid. That was his trauma in life, for while he never felt he was good enough and worthy enough. I would say pause long enough to stay connected to who you are. Don't give up. Like, don't think this is it, because it's not it. Trust this feeling, this nudge. If something's saying, "Oh, maybe you should change," or "Maybe you should try that," or if you find that you're so excited about a certain thing, but I could never do that, it's not what I've trained for. Trust me, just do it.
Retrain.
Literally retrain. Never, do not hold back. I get to do something I absolutely love today. If you'd have told me 5 years ago I'd be doing what I'm doing now, never. If you'd told me I'd even meditate, that wasn't me. But I found beauty in my trauma, in a way. And it's just having that self-belief and knowing that it doesn't last. Like, if you keep going, you can achieve absolutely anything.
Off camera, you mentioned that this is the first time you've shared this level of your journey, your story. Why now, and why here on A Class of Their Own?
Really good question, because I didn't know how this was going to go today. There's been something in me for a long time that has said, like, Tracey, like, it's time. It's time to talk. It's time to tell more of your story. It's time for people to get to know Tracey, because I think some people seem to perceive that when you do the job that I do, that every day's fine, your life has been perfect. It's completely the opposite. When I spoke to you, I had that nudge again, that connection. And I thought, fuck it, why not? And that is my answer. Excuse the French.
Oh, good.
And I trusted you. And I don't know why, because I didn't know you.
Yeah.
And I still don't really know you. But my intuition is an amazing thing. It's one of my superpowers. And yeah, I thought, why not?
Thank you for trusting me. Thank you for coming on and sharing your story. We started this conversation with who is Tracey? 360 degrees back to the start. Is there anything you would add or change with who is Tracey?
She's relentless. That's who she is. She sees the great in every single person. She sees their genius. And I'm like the biggest cheerleader for so many people. And I want them to experience what they were really born for. Yeah. That's me, I suppose. That's who I am.
Thank you for such a deep conversation. Thank you for sharing who you are. And thank you for trusting me.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you.
If you enjoyed that conversation, please share A Class of Their Own podcast with your friends and family. Subscribe, follow, and like. It really helps us continue to grow. Keep being you through connection, learning, and play. You are a class of your own.